again, and thank you for listening, coming on board again to the Strategy Club. We've been doing this series about basically your career strategy, if you like, and I've been sharing mine, and I hope it's been useful so far. And if you do have any questions, I want you to be bold, ask the questions. Let this series be useful to you. Make it useful. You can do that. So when I got to Accra, one of the first mistakes I made was that I was waiting for instructions. Remember, I have talked about this before. So I would come to the office, do a few things, read a few things, and I'm looking out, waiting for my boss to say, this is what to do. And it was people were like, this was my first time out of the country, my first time in a new environment of that nature. I had to switch jobs from a company where I was well known. I was introverted. But then somebody took interest in me. He was my boss's boss. His name is Agbeko, Mr. Agbeko. Yeah. And he took interest in me. He wanted to help me. So he began to make demands of me. The people that take enough interest in you to make demands of you professionally, those are your friends. To challenge you to do something more, those are your friends. Those are your true friends. Those who make you want to do more than you think you're capable of. So he challenged me about the performance of a platform called Postilion. It was basically transaction management system for automated telemachines, ATMs. So there was a lot of complaint about the performance. I had been navigating the environment, doing stuff, but the problems were there, and I had to read to know what could I do. I came up with some proposals, implemented some things. It gave me a little bit of guidance. At first, I tried to defragment, the partner to Postilion called Post Office, so that it could perform better. It gave a little bit of respite, but that wasn't just enough, right? I want to also mention that one of the first times I went to the switch room was where the colleagues who were managing Postilion sat. There was a bit of laughter because it appeared that so many people had tried to solve the problems they were facing, performance problems with the database for Postilion. But eventually, I pulled knowledge back from my days on Airtel. Somebody had told me about address windowing extensions away and how you could use it to basically tune a database system so that a database system that was sitting on an operating system that was a 32-bit system. So the instruction set or the CPU architecture could be a 32-bit, could have a 32-bit bus or a 64-bit bus. It determines how communication happens at a very low level within the CPU. You could, if you bought a 32-bit system, you're stuck with it, and the software you run on that system will have to be 32-bit compatible. If you bought a 64-bit system that had a 64-bit enabled CPU, you could run both 64-bit software and 32-bit enabled software on it. Now, SQL Server 2008, I believe, had capacity to run as a 64-bit platform, but they were running SQL Server on a Windows 2003, if I remember correctly. I may have the figures not right, but they were running on an older operating system which could not do 64-bit. So we had to configure something called PAE, basically a configuration option to reboot the system so that it could accommodate 64-bit applications. And we also had to, on the SQL Server layer, had to enable address window in extension so that the SQL Server database could address memory in 64-bit chunks. So it basically improved the performance significantly. But that meant using more memory, that means being able to allocate more memory, etc. So when I did that, when I implemented it based on the documentation that Microsoft had provided, the next day, the performance difference was significant. It was massive. You see, this is knowledge that already existed. Somebody had just had to dig it up and take the chance of trying it out. So you may find yourself in those areas, in those scenarios in your organization, in your role, where you pick up something and just identify a gap. Identify an area that has not been explored before, because so much knowledge is available. But it's taking that knowledge and implementing it in your scenario in a way that brings about what is perceived as business value. That single action idea, effort of mine that created that outcome eventually got me promoted the next year. So there was progress. There was, just that. And from then on, I became the authority in SQL Server. I remember a certain case. They were having so many arguments about what port is this listening on, what's happening here. They can't connect to the SQL Server instance. Eventually, they called me in. I looked at it. I laughed. I laughed at it because what was simply happening was they had installed SQL Server, a named instance of SQL Server. There is a default instance and a named instance. And the named instance will typically pick up a random port number every time it is restarted. So you had to explicitly configure the port number when you install a named instance. So we made that change and it was fine. So I became the expert, so to speak. And there were so many cases where we had to keep, and you see, you don't have to know too much. You have to know one thing very well. Know one thing very well, depth, right? And you find out that you can reuse that knowledge over and over again in different scenarios, and you are the expert. At some time, the knowledge expires, actually. You need to now morph again. You need to morph again. You need to change again. You need to escalate yourself again in order to become more relevant to the next phase of growth. Let me stop here with that story. Thank you so much.